Mom, it's just a short trip. Remember how, as a child, you and Dad took me to see the Grand Canyon? I remembered it when the sun was baking my head and my lips felt like they'd been sandpapered off. I remembered it when my legs stopped listening to me and every step felt like I was wading through wet concrete. I remembered how, as a boy, my son loved hiking, how he used to beg us to go out west every summer, how he'd stand on the edge of a trail with that stupidly bright smile and say, "This is what heaven must look like." And now, apparently, he'd decided to bring me back for my last hike. My last hike, he probably thought. What that fool didn't know was that I'd changed my will almost a year earlier. Everything I own, my house in Tempe, my savings, my retirement accounts, the life insurance, was no longer going to him. It was going to my grandchildren, and only after they finished college and had at least one full year of work under their belts. I wanted them to remember their grandmother not as a wallet, but as someone who believed in them getting their own feet under them. There was nothing left in that will for my heartless son. So while I stumbled through that desert, tongue swelling, throat closing, legs shaking, the thought that kept me moving was not that I wanted to live. It was that if I lived, I was going to make him regret underestimating me. At some point, I sat down because my vision tunneled, and the rocks around me looked like they were swimming. I remember thinking, well, I've had a good run. I wish I could hang around for one more sunset. Then everything went black. When I woke up, the first thing I felt was wetness on my lips. "Easy, ma'am, easy. You can't drink too much at once. Little sips." A plastic bottle pressed against my mouth. Water dripped in, cold and strange, as if I'd forgotten what it was. I forced my eyes open. I was lying across the back seat of a dusty SUV, the ceiling weirdly close, the air conditioning blasting glorious cold air on my face. A man in a green uniform leaned over me, hat pushed back, brown face lined from sun and worry. A park ranger. "What's your name?" he asked gently. I blinked at him. "My name? My name is the one who will put her ungrateful son in prison. I'm the woman he underestimated. The mother who raised a monster and then decided, late but not too late, to draw a line." "My name is Linda," I croaked finally. My voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. "All right, Linda, I'm Ray. You're safe now. You're in Canyon View National Recreation Area. Do you remember how you got out there?" Oh, I remembered, and I was about to make sure everybody else did too. I turned 60 last October. I live in Tempe, Arizona. One-story ranch house, beige stucco, desert landscaping I finally got right after 20 years of killing succulents. Widow, retired high school English teacher, 2 kids, 3 grandkids, 1 ancient cat who hates everyone except me. On paper, my life is boring, and honestly, boring has always suited me just fine. I've buried parents, a husband, and more students than I care to think about. I've watched kids grow up and become decent people, and I've watched kids grow up and become walking disasters. I've dealt with alcoholic parents screaming at me because their precious baby got a C, principals who didn't want trouble, school boards who thought teachers were the problem, and more budget cuts than any sane person should ever have to endure. People rarely surprise me anymore. My son, Mark, used to be my exception. When he was little, he was that affectionate kid other moms were jealous of, always hugging me, always drawing pictures of us, always saying things like, "I'm gonna buy you a big house when I'm rich, Mom." He loved hiking, camping, Boy Scouts, all of it. His dad took him out on the trails every warm weekend, and they'd come back sunburned and filthy and happy. When my husband had his heart attack 15 years ago, sudden, massive, the kind of thing you don't walk away from, Mark cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry. He was 24 then. I thought grief had broken something open in him, made him softer, more aware of how fragile everything is. What I didn't notice was what else it did. It also taught him that life can end quickly, that sometimes people just drop dead, and that when they do, whatever they have gets passed down. I'm not one of those parents who says, I gave my child everything. I didn't.
I did what I could. We were solidly middle class. We had health insurance, food on the table, beat-up used cars, and a mortgage we could just manage. No ski trips, no private schools, no Disney every spring. My kids had part-time jobs in high school if they wanted extras. They both went to state schools, which I helped with, but they took loans too. My daughter, Jenna, understood that. Mark understood it too, when it suited him. He bounced around a lot in his 20s. Couple of semesters of college, dropped out, went back, switched majors, got into some kind of entrepreneur phase that suspiciously looked like doing nothing and posting motivational quotes, joined a multi-level marketing company, sold knives, sold supplements, sold health coaching. Eventually, he settled into real estate. It fit him. He liked talking. He liked selling dreams. He liked dressing well and pretending his life was shinier than it was. On the surface, he did okay. Good years, bad years, always just a couple of big deals away from really making it. In reality, he lived a lot on credit. His wife, Megan, who is a puzzle I'm still not finished with, worked as a dental hygienist. She's one of those people who always smiles, but you're not sure what they really think. We had that polite, slightly strained relationship lots of mothers-in-law have with the women their sons marry. We were never best friends. We were never enemies. Just something in between. They had 2 kids, my grandkids, Ethan, now 20, and Lily, 18, actual bright spots in my life. Ethan's the quiet, thoughtful type, engineering major, always tinkering with something. Lily's in her first year of college, majoring in something with art that I don't fully understand, but I pretend I do. Both of them have part-time jobs. Both work their butts off. Because of that, I started worrying about my will a few years back. I don't have Rockefeller money, but I've got a paid-off house, retirement savings, a decent life insurance policy, and enough squirreled away that I don't lie awake every night watching the ceiling fan spin and wondering if I'll starve at 85. My original will, written when my husband was alive, was very simple. Everything to him if I go first, everything to the kids if we go together or he goes first. 50-50. Clean cut. Seemed fair at the time, but as I watched my kids, it stopped feeling fair. Jenna, my daughter, is a nurse, married to a decent guy. Stable, not flashy. They budget. They save. They've got 2 kids of their own, and I've watched her spend years putting money into 529 plans instead of buying herself things she wanted. Mark, on the other hand, was always almost catching up, almost getting ahead, almost about to close a massive deal. And in the meantime, he was leasing new cars he didn't need, going on business trips to Vegas, and posting pictures of himself in rented Airbnbs with captions like, "If your circle doesn't motivate you, it's not a circle, it's a cage." I'm old, not blind. I started to see the writing on the wall. If I dropped dead tomorrow, Mark wouldn't see my estate as a blessing. He'd see it as a reset button. The idea of him burning through the money I'd saved by clipping coupons and working overtime made my stomach turn. So about a year before he took me hiking, I went to see a lawyer. The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and copy paper. Most people your age are worried about leaving their kids enough. You're worried about leaving them too much. I'm not worried about too much in general. I'm worried about too much, too fast, to the wrong person. He smiled slightly. Your son? I didn't answer that directly. I just gave him the facts. Oh, we see this a lot, he said. Do you have any grandkids? 4, I said. 2 from my daughter, 2 from my son. All of them are working, in school, or both. They're good kids. Well, he said, leaning back, you have options. We set up a trust. We rewrote everything. The new plan was simple. My house, retirement accounts, savings, and life insurance would go into the trust. The beneficiaries would be my grandkids, split evenly. They wouldn't get a cent until they graduated from a 4-year college or trade school. After that, they'd have to complete 1 full year of work, W-2, 1099, something verifiable. Once those conditions were met, they'd get staggered distribution so they wouldn't blow it all at once. I also reserved the right to support my kids while I was alive however I saw fit. Gifts, help, whatever. But when I died, the trust was for the grandkids. My children, on paper, got nothing directly. I signed the documents feeling oddly light. The lawyer looked over his glasses at me. "Do you want to tell your children?" "I'll tell my daughter," I said. "She'll understand." "And your son?" I looked out the window at the parking lot, at the pale Arizona sky and the dust devils dancing in the distance. "I'll let him keep believing what he wants to believe," I said. Maybe that was petty. Maybe I should have sat him down and said, "Listen, Mark, life is not a casino and I'm not your ATM." But a tired part of me, tired from years of hearing, "I just need a little help, Mom, just this once," wanted him to sit with reality for once, even if he didn't know it yet. I told Jenna over coffee a week later. She stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "You're sure about this?" "I am." "And Mark?" I didn't tell him. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "He's going to be furious one day." "Probably," I said, "but he's already furious half the time. At the government, at taxes, at the market, at the universe. He can add me to the list." She snorted. Then her face changed. "Mom, just be careful, okay? He's not a bad person, but he's desperate sometimes. Desperate people do stupid things." "Mark would never hurt me," I said automatically. I believed that. At least, the part of me that remembered the little boy hugging my knees did. The rest of me wasn't so sure. The thing about slow disasters is that you don't see them starting. You just start noticing that every conversation feels off. The first red flag came 3 months after I changed my will. Mark took me out to lunch. That alone should have tipped me off. He rarely picked up the check unless he was trying to impress someone. We went to this trendy place in Scottsdale he liked, all reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs and waiters who called me ma'am in a way that made me feel ancient. He ordered a fancy burger. I ordered a salad because I tried on a pair of jeans the week before and didn't like what the mirror told me. "Mom," he said brightly once our drinks arrived, "so I've been thinking a lot about the future." Oh, here we go, I remember thinking. "Have you?" I said, sipping my iced tea. "Yeah," he said. "I mean, I'm not getting younger, you're not getting younger." "Thank you for that." He laughed like he'd said something hilarious, then leaned forward, putting on his serious business face. "I just want to make sure you're safe," he said. "Long term. What's your plan, as you get older, if something happens?" "I have my plan," I said. "I've done my paperwork." He waved a dismissive hand. Yeah, but those lawyers just want to get paid. You need someone you trust to help manage all that." "I do have someone," I said. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Who?" "Myself." He laughed a little too loud. "Mom, come on, be serious." "I am being serious. I'm fine, Mark." He chewed on that for a second. It might make sense for you to add me on your accounts, just in case of an emergency, like if you end up in the hospital or something." Ah, there it was. "That's what powers of attorney are for," I said, "which I also have handled." "With who?" "Not with you," I said bluntly. He leaned back, wounded. "Wow, okay. You don't trust your own son?" "Mark," I said, putting my fork down, "you are constantly juggling debt, chasing deals and living on the brink, as you say. I love you, but I'm not tying my oxygen mask to someone already gasping for air." "That's harsh," he said quietly. "It's honest." His jaw worked. He smiled again, but it was tight. "All right, Mom, if that's how you feel." The rest of lunch was awkward. He paid. That was another red flag. After that, he started asking more questions. Little things slipped into conversations. "How's your house insurance, Mom? You sure you're getting the best rate? Did you ever finish that life insurance paperwork? I know a guy who can look it over."
"Geez, you're lucky. If I had your nest egg, I'd retire tomorrow." He joked about being my only heir. He brought it up so often that I started keeping tally in my head. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That's what older women are taught to think, by the way, that we're overreacting, that we're paranoid, that we worry too much. But no, I'd go over to his house to see the grandkids, bring a casserole, and somewhere between his complaining about the market and bragging about some huge client, he'd say something like, "Well, worst case, I just move into your place when you kick it, right?" I'd laugh it off because what else do you do? One day, though, I didn't laugh. I'd had a bad week, doctor's appointments, car trouble. The cat had decided my bed was her new litter box for reasons known only to her demonic little soul. Mark was in my kitchen, picking at leftovers while I loaded the dishwasher. So, what are you actually leaving, Jenna? Just curious.
The same thing I'm leaving you, I said, closing the dishwasher with a little more force than necessary. Huh, he said. Well, I hope she doesn't blow her half helping her deadbeat husband open another failing plumbing business. I turned around slowly. Her husband has a steady job and a pension. You, on the other hand, have 5 credit cards and a leased SUV. He bristled. Wow, you really think that little of me? I think you're chasing something you don't know how to catch, I said. And I think you're counting on me as your safety net. He stared at me, and for a second, just one, I saw something cold behind his eyes. Don't worry, Mom, he said, eventually, with a tight smile. I know exactly what I'm doing. That sentence chilled me more than anything. The idea for the hiking trip came from him, of course. It was March. Not peak heat yet, but we were moving in that direction. The snowbirds were starting to clear out, and every other commercial on TV was about air conditioning checkups. He called me one evening, voice bright. Hey, Mom, remember that trip we took when I was like 10, when you and Dad took me out to Canyon View, the overlook with the little railings and the trail? Of course I remembered. My husband had almost passed out trying to keep up with 10-year-old Mark on the trail. I'd teased him about it for years. Yes, I said slowly. We should go, Mark said. Just you and me. You know, like a mother-son thing, before you're too old to do stuff like that. Thank you again, I said dryly. He laughed. You know what I mean. Get out of the house, enjoy life. You don't do enough of that. That's because I'm busy going to doctor appointments and reading warning labels in 8-point font. Come on, Mom. It'll be fun. Just a day trip. I'll drive. We'll leave early, beat the heat, hit the main overlook, walk a little bit of the trail like old times, take some photos, grab lunch in town, then come back. I hesitated. The idea did sound nice. I hadn't been out there in years. I'd been a little lonely, if I'm honest. My friends had scattered. Some moved away, some were too busy with grandkids, well, at this age, you start counting the ones you've lost more than the ones you have. And this was my son asking to spend time with me. The part of me that still saw the boy with the scraped knees wanted to say yes. All right, I said finally. Let's do it. He whooped. Great! Next Saturday, I'll pick you up at 6. Wear good shoes. If this were a movie, this is where there'd be ominous music. Reality is quieter. He picked me up on Saturday at 6. He had a big smile, a rented SUV for comfort, and a new pair of hiking boots. I had my old, sturdy pair, my sun hat, a light jacket, and the small backpack I'd used for decades. I packed snacks, a couple of protein bars, some trail mix, a little first aid kit, my phone, and a stainless steel water bottle filled to the brim. He laughed at my pack. You look like you're crossing the Andes. It's called being prepared, I said. He held up his phone. We'll be fine. There's a visitor center, water stations, the whole thing. It's not 1975 anymore. Nature still doesn't care about your phone, I muttered. I didn't see whether he packed water for himself. I assumed he did. That was mistake number 1. The drive out there was nice, actually.
We talked, we reminisced. He brought up stories from when he was a kid. Some of them I'd forgotten. Some I'd never known he remembered. I let myself relax. When we got to the park, it was busier than I expected. Families, RVs, hikers with fancy gear, kids running around with those little Junior Ranger booklets. We went to the main overlook first. It was as beautiful as I remembered, vast and humbling and indifferent. "Selfie?" he said, pulling out his phone. We took a picture, our faces too close, the canyon yawning behind us. "See?" he said, flipping the camera to show me. "Not bad for an old lady." "Watch it," I said, but I was smiling. Then he said, "We should hit that little side trail, the one from when I was a kid. Remember? It loops around and comes back." We walked past a ranger station. There were signs everywhere about heat, hydration, staying on marked trails, letting someone know your plan. We passed a big water refill station.
"Let me top off my bottle," I said. "Nah, we're fine," Mark said. "It's just a short loop. We'll be back in an hour." "I want to anyway," I said, stubborn. I walked over and filled my bottle to the top. He looked irritated for a second, then covered it with a smile. "Sure, Mom, whatever makes you feel better." Looking back, I think that moment annoyed him, that I took control of even something that small. We set off down the trail. He was right. At first it was easy. Well marked, not too steep, plenty of people. We walked. We talked. He told me about a big deal he was working on. I listened to about half of it. The other half of my attention was on my footing. My knees aren't what they used to be. At some point, things started to thin out. Fewer people, more space between them. "Is this still the loop?" I asked. "Yeah," he said easily. "They updated the trail. It's all on the new map." I didn't see any map. That was mistake number 2. We walked farther. The sun climbed higher. My water bottle got lighter. "You sure this is a loop?" I asked after a while, stopping to catch my breath. "Totally," he said. "GPS says we're good." He showed me his phone. There was some kind of app open, lines and dots. I couldn't make sense of it, but it looked official. We kept walking. At some point, the trail got narrower, less shade. The ground underfoot went from packed earth to loose rock. "Mark," I said, "I think we should turn around." "We're almost back to the main trail," he said, not even out of breath. "Trust me, going back will take longer." "That doesn't make sense," I said. He stopped and turned, hands on his hips. "Mom, you're fine. You're always saying you're tougher than you look." I bristled, because he wasn't wrong. But the air felt hotter, my hat was damp, my heart was doing something I didn't like. "5 more minutes," he said. "If we don't hit the turn by then, we go back. Deal?" 5 minutes, I said. That was mistake number 3. I don't know exactly when I realized something was wrong. Not with the trail, with him. We walked in silence for a bit. I watched my feet. He walked a little ahead, occasionally checking his phone. Finally, I said, "Mark, how much farther?" No answer. "Mark?" He was farther ahead than I thought, maybe 50, 60 yards. Standing at a fork I hadn't seen on any map, looking down one branch. "Mark!" I called, louder. He turned, and something in his face had changed. He looked blank. Not angry, not worried, just flat. "Hey," I called, forcing a laugh. "You trying to ditch your old mother?" He walked back a few steps toward me. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm hot," I said. "My heart's racing, and my water's low. I think we need to go back." "Yeah," he said slowly. "About that." He looked over his shoulder, then back at me. "What?" I asked. My voice sounded thin even to me. He took a breath, then shrugged like we were discussing the weather. "You know, Mom, I've been doing some math lately." I stared at him. "What?" "Life expectancy, your assets, my debt load, the fact that you've clearly decided I'm an incompetent idiot who doesn't deserve to manage anything."
A cold feeling slid down my spine, cutting through the heat. "Mark," I said carefully, "we can talk about this at home." "No, we can't, because at home, you can hang up, you can walk away. Out here, we're finally alone." My mouth went dry. I glanced around. We were alone. The last hikers we had passed were at least 10 minutes behind us, if they hadn't turned off. "Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you're scaring me." He tilted his head, almost curious. "Am I?" "Yes." He sighed. "I don't want you to be scared, Mom. I really don't. I need things to change." "What things?" I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated, then said, "Tell me you updated your will. Just tell me I'm getting what I should get after everything I've done for you." Everything he'd done for me? I almost laughed then, hysterically. "I updated my will, but not the way you think." His jaw clenched. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, and suddenly I was very, very clear, that everything is going to your children and Jenna's kids, not to you, not to Jenna, the grandkids, after they finish school and work for at least a year. That's the deal. His face went white. "You're lying," he said. "I'm not. You do that to your own son?" "I do that to adults who are not responsible with money, which you've proven over and over again you are not." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Then something snapped. "You know what, Mom?" he said. "You always taught me actions have consequences." "Yes," I said slowly. "Remember that." He turned around and walked away.
At first, I thought it was a joke. I kept expecting him to turn back, grin, say, "Gotcha," and offer me his arm. He didn't. "Mark," I called. He kept walking. Faster. "Mark, this isn't funny." He didn't even look back. Panic rose like bile. I started walking after him, but my legs didn't want to cooperate. My chest felt tight. The heat pressed down like a hand. Even then, I didn't fully believe it. There's a part of a mother's brain that refuses to accept her childhood actually hurt her. You can know your kid is selfish, immature, careless, but that part of you hangs on to the good parts so stubbornly that it blinds you. He reached the fork and took the left path. I shuffled faster, heart pounding, but he was moving quicker than me. "Mark!" I screamed. He paused, just for a second, and turned. Our eyes met across the distance. For the rest of my life, I will remember that look. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even hatred. It was calculation. He lifted his hand in a small, almost apologetic wave. Then he turned the corner and disappeared. There's no graceful way to describe what happened next. I panicked. I shouted his name until my throat hurt, then until I had no voice left. I tried to follow, but within minutes I'd lost which little side path he'd taken, and the landscape started to wobble. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. I think I walked in circles for a while. The sun climbed higher. My hat felt like it was glued to my head. My water bottle got lighter and lighter until it was empty, and when I tilted it up and nothing came out, I cried. Actual tears, hot and useless. I tried to remember the advice from all the survival shows Jenna's husband liked to watch. Stay put. Conserve energy. Find shade. But my brain was buzzing. He left me. He actually left me. He knows my heart isn't perfect. He knows my knees are bad. He knows I hate heat. He left me anyway. Not by accident. On purpose. Somewhere in there, my body switched to autopilot. I walked, I sat, I walked again. I don't really remember. At one point, I tripped on a rock and went down hard, scraping my palms. I just lay there, cheek pressed to the warm dirt, thinking, so this is how it ends. On my face, in the middle of nowhere, my son halfway back to my car and my house and my life, planning how he's going to sell it all. I thought about Ethan and Lily, about Jenna's kids, about the lawyer, about the trust documents in my safe deposit box. I thought, he doesn't know he's not getting a cent. That thought made me smile.
A real ugly smile, teeth dry and lips cracked. I hoped it haunted him. Then the world narrowed, darkened, and went away. When I woke up in the Ranger's SUV, I was sure I was dead. Easy, he said again. You're all right, you're dehydrated and you've got a nasty scrape, but you're alive. Water, I croaked. He gave me another careful sip. What's the last thing you remember? He asked. I looked around. The interior of the SUV was cluttered. First aid kit, radio, maps, a big jug of water, some kind of rescue pack. Trail, I said. My son, he left me. The Ranger and the woman in the passenger seat, another Ranger, younger with a braid down her back, exchanged a look. Can you tell me what happened? She asked gently. It took effort, but I did. Not perfectly, not coherently, but I told them enough. When I finished, the SUV was quiet except for the air conditioner. The male Ranger, Ray, he'd said, put the car into drive. We're going to get you to the medical station first, then we'll let law enforcement handle it from there. Law enforcement? I repeated. Yes, ma'am, the younger Ranger said. If what you're saying is accurate, that's serious, especially with you being a senior. I'm 60, I snapped automatically. They both smiled a little. In this park, Ray said, that counts as a senior for heat risk and for certain laws. Something in his tone made me focus. I asked, what laws? He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. He said, elder abuse, maybe attempted homicide. That's for the sheriff to sort out. Our job is to get you safe. Elder abuse, attempted homicide. Those words hung in the air like something too heavy to lift. I lay back against the seat, the cool air washing over my face. And for the first time since I woken up, a clear, cold thought cut through the fog. He thinks I'm going to die. He thinks he's going home to wait for a phone call. He thinks he's about to collect. He has no idea what's waiting for him instead. They took me to the park's medical center first. From there, I got a short ambulance ride to the nearest hospital. I won't bore you with every test and IV and nurse who called me hun and sweetie, but I will say this. Dehydration at my age is no joke. I'd cooked myself from the inside out. By the time a sheriff's deputy came to talk to me, I was hooked up to fluids and felt like I'd been run over. He was a tall man, late 40s maybe, with that worn-out look cops get when they've seen too many people at their worst. I'm Deputy Carlson, he said. Mind if I sit? Please. He sat, flipped open a notebook. The Rangers say your son left you on a trail, he said. Can you tell me what happened? I told the story again, this time more coherent. I included details I'd left out before, the conversations about my will, the strange lunch a few months back, the way he kept bringing up my assets. When I got to the part where he turned, waved, and left, my voice wobbled. The deputy's jaw tightened. You're sure he knew you were in distress? He asked. He knew I was hot, short of breath, and low on water, I said. He knew my heart history. He knew my age. He knew we didn't have a clear path back. He knew all of that. And he left you anyway. Yes. Did he say anything before he left that indicated intent? He asked, like he was reading from a mental checklist. I repeated his words. You always taught me actions have consequences. The deputy's eyes changed when I said that. Do you have any reason to believe he thought he'd benefit from your death? He asked. I almost laughed. I told him about the will, the old one and the new one. He doesn't know I changed it, I said. As far as he's concerned, he inherits half of everything, house, cash, accounts. And he's in debt? The deputy asked. Up to his eyeballs. He wrote that down. Ma'am, he said after a moment, I'm going to be blunt. People get lost. People panic. People make selfish decisions. We see that out here all the time. But leaving your mother, who's obviously in distress, without trying to get help, without calling it in, without reporting you missing at the trailhead, that's not an ooks. That's a choice. A nasty little voice in my head whispered, he didn't call anyone because he didn't want you to be found. Aloud, I said, so what happens now? Now, the deputy said, we find him, we get his side, and we start digging. If the evidence supports what you're saying, he could be in serious trouble. I stared at the ceiling for a moment. Good, I said quietly. He studied me. Most moms in your position, he said, try to downplay it, or they say they don't want to press charges. They're afraid of ruining their kid's life. I thought of my son's face as he turned away from me on that trail. He tried to end mine, I said. He doesn't get to walk away from that. The deputy's jaw tightened. You're sure he knew you were in distress? He asked. He knew I was hot, short of breath, and low on water, I said. He knew my heart history. He knew my age. He knew we didn't have a clear path back. He knew all of that. And he left you anyway. Yes. Did he say anything before he left that indicated intent? He asked, like he was reading from a mental checklist. I repeated his words. You always taught me actions have consequences. The deputy's eyes changed when I said that. Do you have any reason to believe he thought he'd benefit from your death? He asked. I almost laughed. I told him about the will, the old one and the new one. He doesn't know I changed it, I said. As far as he's concerned, he inherits half of everything, house, cash, accounts. And he's in debt, the deputy asked. Up to his eyeballs. He wrote that down. Ma'am, he said after a moment, I'm gonna be blunt. People get lost. People panic. People make selfish decisions. We see that out here all the time. But leaving your mother, who's obviously in distress, without trying to get help, without calling it in, without reporting you missing at the trailhead, that's not an oops. That's a choice. A nasty little voice in my head whispered, he didn't call anyone because he didn't want you to be found. Aloud, I said, so what happens now? Now, the deputy said, we find him, we get his side, and we start digging. If the evidence supports what you're saying, he could be in serious trouble. I stared at the ceiling for a moment. Good, I said quietly. He studied me. Most moms in your position, he said, try to downplay it, or they say they don't want to press charges. They're afraid of ruining their kid's life. I thought of my son's face as he turned away from me on that trail. He tried to end mine, I said. He doesn't get to walk away from that. Jenna almost broke the hospital bed hugging me. Mom, she kept saying, oh my God, I'm going to kill him. I am going to... Hey, I said, grabbing her wrist, let the state handle that part. She pulled back, eyes red, nose red, nurses peeking around the curtain like they were watching a soap opera in real life. Are you okay? She demanded. What did they say? How bad was it? I'm not dying. I'm just... well done. She half laughed, half cried. We sat like that for a while, her holding my hand, me sipping water with ice chips like it was the best cocktail I'd ever had. Then I told her everything. I watched her face go from horrified to furious to something like numb acceptance. She said, I knew he was a mess. I knew he took advantage, but this? I know. She could have just asked you for help, she said. He has, I said, for years, and I've helped for years. It's never enough. She wiped her face roughly. What do you want to do? The question was simple. The answer felt like it weighed 50 pounds. I want him held accountable, I said. Legally, publicly, all of it. Her eyes met mine. Okay, she said. Then that's what we'll do. The thing about revenge, if you want to call it that, is that it's not one big dramatic moment. It's paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. Deputy Carlson came back the next day with a recording device and some forms. He said, we found your son. How? I asked, heart pounding. He lifted an eyebrow. He was in the parking lot, sitting on the tailgate of your car. My stomach lurched. He was what? According to him, the deputy said, you wandered off while he was using the bathroom. He went looking, couldn't find you, assumed you went back to the car. When you didn't show, he got worried. Did he tell anyone? I asked. My voice was flat. The deputy's jaw tightened. Eventually, after a few hours, his timeline doesn't line up with what the rangers saw. They spotted you tracks and found you in an area you wouldn't have reached if his story were true. And his phone location data? He shook his head. Let's just say it's not in his favor. Good, I thought viciously. Is he under arrest? I asked. Not yet, he said. We're treating this as an active investigation. I wanted a full, recorded statement from you, under no medication that could alter your memory, before we take the next steps. I looked at the IV bag. I'm sober, I said. Unfortunately. We recorded my statement. It took over an hour. When it was done, I felt both drained and strangely energized. I was being believed. That is no small thing, especially as an older woman. After he left, Jenna looked at me. You know he's going to call, she said. Mark, he's going to have some story. He can tell it to my lawyer, I said. You're really going to do this? Yes, I am. She nodded slowly. Then I'm with you. Mark did call, twice while I was still in the hospital. I let both go to voicemail. The first message was panicked. Mom, oh my God, I just heard from the ranger station. Where are you? Are you okay? Call me, please. This is all a huge misunderstanding, I swear. The second was more controlled. Mom, listen, I don't know what you told those people, but they're twisting everything. You know I would never hurt you. We got separated, that's it. You know how you get turned around. The cops here are overreacting because they don't want to get sued. Just call me, okay? We can fix this. I saved both messages. Then I sent them to Deputy Carlson. He'd said, document everything. Don't delete anything. If he texts or emails, keep it. Mark switched to text when he realized I wasn't picking up. First, hey mom, just checking in, love you. Then, a few hours later, they're asking me all these questions like I'm some kind of criminal. Can you please reassure them? This is crazy. Then, when I didn't respond, I get that you're upset, but you know how sensitive the cops are about liability. We can't let this spiral. Think about the grandkids. There it was. The guilt card. He tried again the next morning. If you don't call them and straighten this out, they could charge me with something. Do you really want your own son to go to jail? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, slowly. If you didn't want consequences, you shouldn't have left me to die. I hit send before I could overthink it. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, wow, that's how it is? After everything I've done for you? I didn't respond. He called twice more. I blocked his number. Then I called my lawyer. If you've never had to weaponize your own legal adulthood against your own child, let me tell you, it's a special kind of sick feeling. My lawyer, Mr. Vargas, met me in his office again, this time with Jenna present. I heard from the sheriff's office. They wanted copies of your estate planning documents, including your old will, your new trust, and any powers of attorney. Can they have those? I asked. With your permission, yes, he said. And in this case, you want them to. It establishes motive. Doesn't exactly make me look like Mother of the Year, I muttered. You're not on trial. Your choices were reasonable. His choices weren't. We signed papers. He made copies. Then he leaned back and studied me. Linda, criminal charges are one thing. That's the state versus your son. You're a witness there. But you also have civil options. Like what? I asked. You could seek a restraining order, he said. You could sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress, though that's harder. You could also, if you wanted, make certain changes to your estate plan to further protect yourself and your assets from any attempt he might make to challenge them. Like what? I asked again. He smiled faintly. For starters, he said, we can add a very robust no contest clause. If he tries to challenge your will or trust in court and loses, he gets nothing.
Not even whatever small token he might otherwise receive. Right now, he's not a beneficiary at all. But we could add a nominal bequest, say $1, to make the clause bite harder. That sounds petty, I said. It's also protective, he said. Elder financial abuse is a huge issue. Courts are starting to take it very seriously, but abusers can still tie up estates for years with challenges. If we make it very clear that any challenge will result in total forfeiture, it gives your other beneficiaries, your grandkids, a stronger position. I thought about that. I want him locked out of everything, I said, now and later. I don't want him to ever be in a position to speak for me, manage anything for me, or benefit from any decision I make. Then we'll tighten everything, he said, and we'll document in detail the reasons.
The incident in the park, previous financial behavior, any threats he's made. That way, if he ever tries to claim you lacked capacity or were unduly influenced, your paper trail will say otherwise. I nodded. This is going to tear the family apart, Jenna said quietly. I looked at her. Sweetheart, I said, your brother tried to leave me in the desert to die. He did that, not me. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. She swallowed hard. I know, she said. You're right. I hate that it's come to this. So do I said. But here we are. The sheriff's department moved slower than my fury, but faster than I expected. 2 weeks after the incident, while I was still dealing with fatigue and what my doctor called post-heat event recovery, they arrested Mark. The charge sheet was sobering: felony elder abuse, endangerment, and a lesser charge related to false statements to law enforcement. Attempted homicide wasn't on there. When I asked Deputy Carlson why, he was honest. It's hard to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt, he said. Elder abuse and endangerment are plenty serious. And frankly, juries understand those better. The DA thinks she can get a conviction on those and put him away for a while, plus probation after. How long? I asked. My voice sounded too calm to my own ears. Best case for the state, he said. A few years in prison, plus a record that will follow him professionally. He'd likely lose any license tied to his work with vulnerable adults, like real estate. I let that sink in. Good, I said. The arrest made the local news. Son accused of abandoning mother in desert hike, the headline said. They blurred my face in the photos. They didn't blur his. Jenna called me when the segment aired. You sure you're okay with this? She asked. No, I said. But I'm more okay with this than I am with him doing it to someone else. What do you mean? She asked. I closed my eyes. I've tried to get him to add me to my accounts, pressured me about my will. That's financial abuse waiting in the wings. If he gets away with this, what's to stop him from moving in, isolating me, controlling my money, and making my life hell while he waits for me to die? There was a long silence. Nothing, she said finally. Exactly, I said. We both sat with that. Then I said, and what kind of message would it send to Ethan and Lily that their father can try to kill his mother and nothing happens? They'd never... People learn from what they see, not what you tell them, I said. I want them to see that there are consequences for hurting people you're supposed to care for, even if it's family, especially if it's family. Jenna let out a long breath. You're a lot stronger than I am, she said. No, I said. I'm just older and tired of letting men skate by because we're afraid of making a scene. She laughed wetly. Mom? Yes? I'm proud of you. That made my throat tighten more than anything. Court is not like on TV. It's a lot of waiting, a lot of bad coffee, a lot of hearing your life summarized in 3 sentences by people who barely know you. Mark's lawyer tried everything. He painted Mark as a loving son who'd made a terrible mistake under stress. He leaned hard on the idea that I was confused, that the heat had affected my memory, that what I interpreted as intentional abandonment was just miscommunication and poor judgment. They tried to introduce the idea that I'd recently made sudden changes to my estate plan, implying I might be paranoid or under the influence of someone, maybe Jenna. They hinted that I'd always been overly anxious about finances. They tried to poke holes in the timeline. But here's the thing about living to 60 and spending 40 years teaching teenagers. You learn how to tell a story.
On the stand, I told mine, calmly, step by step. No embellishment, no dramatics, just facts. Times, places, words. I described the conversations leading up to the hike, the lunch, the questions about my will, the trail, his expression, his exact words. I answered the defense lawyer's questions with the patience I used to reserve for smart-aleck kids who thought they could talk circles around me. "Mrs. Harris," he said at one point, "isn't it true that you can sometimes get turned around in new places?" "Yes," I said. "I got turned around giving directions to my own house last year. My sense of direction has never been great. But in this case, I wasn't lost. I was abandoned." "Isn't it possible," he pressed, "that the heat affected your perception? That things were said or done that you misremember?" "Anything is possible," I said. "But I am very clear on this. My son knew I was in distress, knew I had limited water, knew we were not on a heavily traveled part of the trail, and chose to walk away for an extended period of time. That wasn't a brief separation. That was a decision." Deputy Carlson testified about the phone data. The Rangers testified about my condition when they found me, and about the state of the trail where I was versus where Mark claimed we'd been. Mr. Vargas testified about my estate planning documents under subpoena, confirming the change in beneficiaries and the removal of Mark and Jenna as direct heirs. Watching Mark's face when he heard, on the record, that he wasn't getting a cent from me was something. Shock, then rage. He kept it mostly in, but I know that jaw clench. I'd seen it when he was 5, and I wouldn't buy him a toy. Some things don't change. The prosecutor did a good job. She was young, but she had that dog-with-a-bone energy you need. In closing, she said, "This case is not about a son who got momentarily separated from his mother on a hike. This case is about a grown man who, faced with the reality that he could no longer control his mother's assets, made a calculated choice to leave her in a situation he knew could kill her. He didn't need to swing a weapon. The heat, distance, and time were his weapon. If not for the intervention of park rangers, we would likely be here on an entirely different case, a homicide, not elder abuse. The law exists to protect people like Mrs. Harris. Hold him accountable." The defense, of course, begged the jury not to criminalize a terrible misunderstanding. The jury went out. They came back in less than 3 hours, guilty, on both major counts. Mark's shoulders slumped. His lawyer patted his arm. Maiden, who had sat stone-faced through the whole thing, covered her mouth. I sat very still. My hands were shaking. Not from regret, from the release of tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The judge sentenced him a few weeks later. 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory counseling, and a permanent mark on his record related to elder abuse. He would lose his real estate license. He would be barred from working in any field that put him in a position of trust over vulnerable adults. He would not be able to obtain power of attorney for anyone. The judge also granted my request for a long-term protective order. He could not contact me directly. Any appeals, any communication had to go through lawyers. "Do you have anything to say?" the judge asked me before issuing the sentence. I stood, leaning more on my cane than I strictly needed to. I taught high school for almost 40 years. I told my students every day that their choices mattered, that they could make mistakes, but that there were some lines you don't cross. My son crossed one. I can forgive a lot of things. I cannot forgive being deliberately left to die. I don't wish him harm. I wish him clarity, and I wish him the consequences he earned. The judge nodded. He said, "So ordered." The gavel came down, and that moment I felt something in me settle. Not joy, not triumph, just a kind of quiet. You might think that was the end. It wasn't. Revenge, real revenge, is not just a sentence. It's making sure the ripple effects go where they need to go and not where they don't.
My next step was my grandchildren. They'd been kept mostly out of the legal details. Ethan and Lily were old enough to understand something serious had happened. They'd watched the news. They knew their father had been arrested.
But kids will fill in blanks with fantasy if you're not careful. So, a month after the sentencing, I asked Jenna to bring them over. We sat at my kitchen table. 4 glasses of lemonade, my cat glaring from the counter, the afternoon sun turning everything that Arizona dusty gold. First, I said, I want you both to know that I love you. Nothing about this changes that. They nodded, eyes wide. Second, I said, your father did something terrible, something that hurt me deeply and could have killed me. The court has dealt with that. He is facing the consequences of his actions. That's between him and the law now. They shifted in their seats. I could see loyalty, confusion, hurt, all fighting it out on their faces. You are not responsible for what he did, I said. You are not tainted by it. You are your own people. Ethan swallowed. Grandma, did he really leave you? Yes, I said. He did. Why? Lily whispered. I considered sugarcoating it. Then I thought about what I wished someone had told me at their age. Because he thought he would benefit if I died, I said. He thought he'd inherit my house, my money, everything. He was wrong about that, but he acted on what he believed, and he chose to leave me when I needed him most. They both looked horrified. Now, I said, I tell you that for 2 reasons. 1, because you deserve the truth, and 2, because I want you to understand something about money. If it ever asks you to hurt someone you love, it's too expensive. We sat with that. Then I pulled out a folder. These, I said, are copies of some documents related to my estate plan. You don't need to memorize them now, but I want you to have them, to know concretely what I've put in place. They exchanged looks. Are we in trouble? Lily asked. No, I said. You are being entrusted. I explained the trust again in simpler terms. I explained the conditions. Finish school, work at least 1 year, then receive things in stages. I told them I had adjusted some details after everything that happened, not to punish them, but to protect them. For instance, they would be required to receive financial counseling through an independent advisor before each distribution, not some cousin with a side hustle. A certified professional. They would also be given letters I'd written, 1 for each of them, plus general letters explaining my reasoning. Those letters were already in the lawyer's file, dated, signed. I didn't tell them everything in the letters. Some things were for later. But I did tell them this. I didn't change my will to hurt your father. I changed it because I believe in you. And because I've watched for years how easy it is to let money turn into a trap instead of a tool. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Grandma, he said, voice trembling, I'm so sorry. For what? For what Dad did. For not seeing it. Hey, I said sharply. Look at me. He did. You are not your father. I said, you didn't do this. You don't have to apologize for his choices. The only thing you have to do is decide what kind of man you want to be. And based on what I've seen, you're already making better choices than he did. His chin wobbled. Lily reached for his hand. I reached for both of theirs. Listen, I said. Your father is going to say a lot of things. He's going to say I betrayed him, that I brainwashed you, that I turned you against him. None of that is true. The courts looked at the evidence. They decided, not me. I stood up. That's all. Will we still be allowed to see him? Lily asked. Yes, I said, if you want to. You're old enough to make that choice. But I hope you'll always remember 2 things when you talk to him. 1, because you are allowed to have boundaries.
If he tries to guilt you, manipulate you, or drag you into his war with me, you can hang up. Walk away. Call me or your mom. 2, you can love someone and not trust them. Both can be true. They sat very still. Then Lily whispered, "You're really strong, Grandma." I smiled. "I'm really old. Sometimes that looks like strength. Mostly it's just being done with nonsense." They laughed a little. That, more than the verdict, felt like justice. Some people think revenge is about making the other person feel what you felt. It's not. You can't make someone feel what they're incapable of feeling. My son will never sit in a desert and understand in his bones what it's like to be left there by the person you gave birth to. He'll never fully grasp the way fear and betrayal and anger tangled in my chest. He doesn't have that wiring.
So my revenge isn't that he suffers like I did. My revenge is that he faces a system he can't talk his way out of. That his choices have public, documented consequences. That his reputation, so carefully curated with luxury car selfies and grind set quotes, now includes a mugshot and a felony record for abandoning his mother. My revenge is that every time he applies for a job, a license, a lease, someone will see elder abuse on his background check. My revenge is that when he eventually gets out, and he will, because this is still a civilized country and we don't lock people up forever for one crime, he will be starting over with less than he ever had. No safety net from me. No inheritance. No, maybe I'll get mom's house when she goes. He gambled on my death. He lost. And my grandkids? They will remember their grandmother not as a victim, but as the woman who stood up in court in front of strangers and said, "He left me." And that is not okay. They'll graduate. They'll work. One day, long after I'm gone, they'll get a letter from some boring trust administrator saying a distribution is ready, according to the weird conditions Grandma wrote. They'll roll their eyes at the hoops I made them jump through. They might cuss me out a little when some financial advisor makes them sit through a budget lesson. And then, maybe, they'll open the other letter. The one I wrote, longhand, sitting at my kitchen table, a cat pawing at the pen. In that letter, I tell them about the desert, about the heat, about the ranger, about the courtroom. And I tell them this: I didn't do any of this because I hated your father. I did it because I loved myself enough to say no. And I loved you enough to show you that you can say no, too. Sometimes, on hot days, I sit on my back porch with a big glass of iced tea and watch the sun sink behind the neighbor's roof. It's not a canyon. There's no breathtaking overlook, just slanted light on stucco and the sound of somebody's sprinkler because they still haven't accepted that grass doesn't belong in Arizona. But it's my sunset. I made it to it. He thought that hike would be my last. Instead, it was the beginning of the end of his illusions. I still wake up some nights, heart pounding, feeling the dry air in my lungs. I still see his face turning away. I still hear myself calling his name, voice cracking. But now when that happens, I don't just see the desert. I see the courtroom. I see the judge's gavel. I see my grandchildren at my kitchen table clutching their lemonade glasses, listening as I tell them the truth. And I see the ranger leaning over me in that SUV asking my name. My name is Linda. I am the woman my son underestimated. I am the mother who raised a boy, watched him become a man I barely recognize, and finally, at 60, decided that biology is not a free pass. I lived, I told my story, and I made sure that when my son remembers me for the rest of his life, it won't be as the woman who died quietly and left him everything.
It will be as the woman's testimony put him in handcuffs. The woman's signature locked him out of her future. The woman who, when left in the desert to die, came back with the law at her side. I wanted to make things right. I think in the ways that matter, I did.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye.